Hi, everyone. Welcome to Get It Together, How the Amplify Fund Supports Black-Led Power Building and Organizing. This is the next session in NFG's 40-year strong virtual convening series. I'm Courtney Benayed, she, her pronouns, and I'm NFG's Director of Membership and Communications. I'm going to pass it off to Amy Kenyon in just a moment, but before I do, I wanted to let you know that we're inviting you to please introduce yourself in the chat by adding your name, pronouns, organization, and location. You can join us on video by turning on your camera, and please do keep your mic muted unless you're speaking. This session is also being recorded and will be available for you to rewatch or share on NFG's website. And now you're up, Amy.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Kenyon, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a proud NFG board member, a senior program officer at the Ford Foundation, and a member of the Amplify Fund's steering committee. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome you all to Amplify's session today as part of the Neighborhood Funders Group 40-year strong virtual convening series. For 40 years, NFG has been bringing together funders who believe in the power of people to transform communities. And since 2018, NFG has honed in on our core purpose of moving more money to grassroots organizations through our first pooled grant-making fund. The Amplify Fund, which was born out of NFG's Democratizing Development Program, is driven by a core belief that community power is the key driver of just and equitable development. And it is a demonstration of philanthropy learning through action together. I know for myself and others, other colleagues, whether you work in a small foundation or a large institution, work in philanthropy can be extremely isolating at times. And it's through the work of NFG and efforts like the Amplify Fund that I find both a political home and an opportunity to connect and work together with leaders and colleagues who challenge and inspire me. So today you will get to hear from some amazing women about Amplify and its support for Black-led power building and organizing. I will turn it over to Rini Banerjee, my fellow Amplify Steering Committee member and the president of the Jesse Smith Noyes Foundation, who will tell you more about today's session. Rini?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Amy. As she said, I'm Rini Banerjee. And as you know, the title of today's session right now is We'll All Get It Together and learn from Amplify about supporting Black-led power building and organizing. And this is Amplify's beautiful infographic, the theory of Amplify's theory of change, that really represents how Amplify works. Amplify, as you know, as Amy said, it's a funder collaborative and learning community operating around the core belief that community power is a key driver of just and equitable development. While Amplify is a short-term fund, the work is designed for long-term impact. And I've seen the impact at play in many, many ways. From my perspective as a president at the Noyes Foundation, a national foundation, we were really drawn to join Amplify to learn about place-based power building. And we've learned a ton. And just to give you a little history, Noyes has historically funded in issue-specific areas. In 2018, we actually let go of those issue areas and really thought about multi-issue power building work. So we've decided that Amplify would be a great space for us to learn together with a whole group of colleagues and really understand place-based grant making. So we've learned quite a bit. We've changed the way we worked actually because of Amplify. We've grounded our work in place, and now Noyes funds specifically in Mississippi and New York State. And the other part of Amplify that is quite exciting and innovative is really the way that they develop their grant-making strategy by following local expertise with participatory methods that actually Noyes has also adopted in our place-based work. In addition to direct grant-making in 8 places, Amplify engages local, regional, and national funders to make sure the work is funded in the long term. Since we know it takes quite a bit of investment and really a change in philanthropic behavior at every scale to make sure long-term power building lasts. Next slide, please. So I get to really, I'm excited to be part of this panel and sort of I'm kind of the host because we have some incredible speakers. So over the next hour, we'll have the pleasure of hearing directly from Amplify team members, local strategy advisors, and funder partners about just how Amplify is doing this work in South Carolina, one of the 8 places, and how Amplify's presence has shifted philanthropic conversations and practices around power building and Black-led organizing. While there are beautiful headshots on the slide, as you can see, you will also meet all these brilliant women live in action today. It's quite exciting. They're so intelligent, so strategic. Really, it's an honor actually for us to hear from them, and also just to learn and gain from sort of their perspective. But I'm just going to quickly touch on, and their full bios are on the NFG website, so please take a look at them at the nfg.org. But we have Tammy Spann, the Vice President at the Hollingworth Funds, Shai Singletary, North and South Carolina Consultant at Amplify, Edie Blakesley, Vice President of Grantmaking and Community Leadership at the Coast Community Foundation of South Carolina, and then our very own Melody Baker, Senior Program Officer at the Amplify Fund. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to give you a quick sense of what to expect for the rest of the session, today's flow. So for the next few minutes, we'll share a short 6-minute video montage that highlights a number of Amplify grantees and is narrated by NFG's own Melody Baker. Then Melody is going to be live in real time, who'll give us a few additional points of context. Then we're going to go into a dynamic panel with Shai, Tammy, and Edie, who will talk all things South Carolina for about 30 minutes. Then we'll have a 3-minute dance and bio break, and then leave a generous 30-minute session for Q&A from the audience and conversation. So that's our plan. We're excited for all of you to join us. And now we're going to get ready. So sit back, relax. You're very, very lucky to get the world premiere of this new video from Amplify Fund.
Who has the power? We have the power to make change today.
Amplify is a funder collaborative and a learning community born out of Neighborhood Funders Group's Democratizing Development program. It's the first fund housed at NFG, and we believe that those closest to the problem are really the best at creating the solutions. At Amplify, we recognize that white supremacy, racism, and power really have always fundamentally shaped the arc of development in communities. And so we work with organizations that are really focused in their work on bringing critical perspectives around race, gender, and economic justice issues.
Living in the inner city my entire life, I realized that the social ills that I saw happening in my community were happening because people who were making the decisions did not necessarily reflect our community. So we realized that we needed to build power, not just from a state or local or federal government level, but from the communities that were directly being impacted by some of those policies.
Build power with us. Building power with us is sharing your story. Yes. Can start with sharing your story. And we really need all of y'all to really get to this issue so that we can fight to change these policies.
Despite the history of segregation, sabotage, institutional racism, West Las Vegas still thrives, and I would argue is the heartbeat of Nevada's Black community.
I know that if I was a man, that I'd have all the money that I needed when I put my vision down on a piece of paper and presented it to people. And if I wasn't a Black woman, the level of disrespect I'm asked to tolerate would not happen.
While there are themes that cut across some of our places, like just recovery from climate disaster and Black land ownership, housing and displacement, and economic justice, Equitable development really looks different depending on where you are and which communities you're working with. As a senior program officer, I really spend a lot of time, speaking with powerful leaders across the country who are working on issues related to development and building power in their communities. They're really, truth tellers. They are working in their respective places to challenge harmful policies and politics and really, fighting with their communities and their bases for just and equitable development.
Hemos estado trabajando ahí en los últimos 5 años y en los últimos años, ¿verdad? Ciertamente después del huracán, con una propuesta de abogacía, una propuesta de que la gente tiene la capacidad de exigir cambios en los procesos que los mantienen sin poder ante el Estado de Derecho.
So what we're trying to do is outline all of the rights that tenants currently have and add real enforcement mechanisms and add a whole slate of new rights for tenants.
To fight for our city.
Yeah. Woo!
It is time to do the right thing, and closing the workhouse is the right thing, and it's time to close it now.
Really envision reality in which Black, Indigenous, and people of color are the ones making decisions about places where they live. This reality includes investment in community infrastructure, specifically investment in Black people, Black futures, and Black communities.
It's enough of us here to bring the spiritual energy. It's enough of us here to move mountains.
Hi, everyone. It's so funny because I feel like I'm wearing the same outfit as in the video. But anyways, hi. Love seeing all the Amplify grantee partners from all across the country. It makes me really nostalgic for the times that when we could connect in person with folks. So hi, everyone. I'm the Senior Program Officer of the Amplify Fund. My name is Melody Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I can't wait to hear from our panelists, Shai, Edie, and Tammy in just a few minutes. But I wanted to share, before handing over the Zoom floor to them, just a couple of additional pieces about Amplify. First, I wanted to just say and share a word about how Amplify kind of selected the 8 places that we work in. We fund in the places where we work because they are politically alive, and all of them are facing key development issues, a range of development issues, but are generally overlooked by national funders. And so given this, we were also clear that a number of our places needed to be located in the South, including South Carolina. And so that was one important piece for us. Another piece you heard briefly from Rini a little bit earlier about how Amplify kind of co-designs grant-making strategies locally. And in each of our 8 places, we invited about 4 to 8 local leaders to participate in a roughly 5 or 6 month local strategy planning process. This was a mix of community leaders and local funders. And the process really involved, kind of one-on-one meetings and group strategy sessions, and ultimately co-writing a strategy document together, which really took me back to those group project college days. But it was a really sort of engaging process. And this really helped ensure that local grant-making strategies were responsive to local context and grounded in Amplify's theory of change. And one of our core values is really being guided by local leadership. And we wanted community control over the development kind of each one of our local grant-making strategies. In that process, we were sure to also make, 6-month grants for roughly $25,000 to the community organizations that the local strategy advisors represented to compensate for their wisdom and time and labor in the strategy process. And Tammy and Edie, who you'll hear from in a few, served as our local strategy, 2 of our 7 local strategy advisors in South Carolina. Finally, I'll just add that Amplify has been able to kind of engage with local and regional organizations and funders for kind of longer term impact, not only by following local wisdom, which is one of our core values, but also by building relationships through a team of place-based program consultants like Shai, who you'll hear from in a bit. She holds relationships with our partners in North Carolina and South Carolina, and helps Amplify kind of stay connected to the day-to-day in each place, so we can be present and accessible locally and keep up to date on local context and capacity needs, and generally be a resource for our grantees in each place and local funders partners. And I'll just say that this has greatly expanded our team capacity so that we can be the kind of place-based funders that we want to be as a full-time staff of 3. So I'll share that, and without any further words, I'll hand it over to Shai to introduce herself and kind of lead a conversation with Edie and Tammy about what our work has been in South Carolina.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheyenne Singletary. I go by Shai. I am a South Carolina native and someone who's returned back home to do work in the Carolinas. And I am so excited to be here today in deep conversation with Edie and Tammy about our beloved state of South Carolina and what it kind of means to do progressive funding and organizing work within the state, and how we've been able to build a joyful and joy-centered community with each other as we've kind of gone through this process and other processes. So I would love to invite Edie and Tammy to share a little bit more about themselves, their institutions and their regional focuses, and then how they kind of came to be a part of Amplify. And I'll toss to Edie first.
Thank you, Shai, and everybody on the phone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for giving your time and being willing to listen to us. So I'm Edie Blakesley. I work with Coastal Community Foundation. We're headquartered in Charleston, but we have 2 offices. One is in the Myrtle Beach area, which is pretty close to the North Carolina border. And the second is in Beaufort, which is pretty close to the Georgia border. So our geography spans the entire coast of South Carolina. And I have been with the foundation a little bit of time. It's coming up on 20 years. And so our footprint has grown in my time, and the work that we do has grown over time. And our focus area, while we're a community foundation, is very broad. We do have some strategic goals around access to economic opportunity, education, and affordability. So I'll stop there for a minute and then toss it over to Tammy.
Thanks, Edie and Shai. Hello, everyone. Just really happy to be here with you. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to thank you in advance for your attention. So if you decide to do something else, you should feel guilty while you're watching. My name is Tamala Spann, or Tammy Spann, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for Hollingsworth Funds. We are a place-based funder in Greenville, South Carolina. Greenville County, South Carolina. We are located, if you're not familiar with South Carolina, between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Atlanta, Georgia. You can't get from one to the other. If you're traveling from North Carolina to Georgia through South Carolina, you have to go through Greenville. And we are a type 1 supporting org, and not a traditional foundation, but a type 1 supporting org, which simply means we have named beneficiaries. 55% of what we give every year goes to Furman University, a private university here in Greenville County that was near and dear to our founder's heart. He attended there, and also the YMCA, another organization that was pretty special to him. We are also, we wholly own a for-profit real estate development company. And we also have a leasing arm as well of our business. So our primary focus is on increasing economic mobility in our community for those in the lower quintiles. And I will stop there and turn it back over to Shai.
Thanks so much, Tammy and Edie. As y'all can see, we're just continuously smiling at each other because we love spending time together and getting to talk with each other. And as I reflect on this panel being called Get It Together, it's something that makes me think a lot about what our wins and successes really look like in South Carolina. I think a lot of time people kind of write us off as a very conservative state, a state where not much is going on, but don't really understand what it takes to build successful movements within a state like ours, or how to recognize what a successful movement looks like. Something that I always tell folks is this past election, we had almost 80% of the electorate turn out, which is in part because of organizing from groups who are really organizing around issue-based things, doing GOTV work for the first time in incredibly hostile situations, working together, building new networks, having conversations. And although that might not feel like a success anywhere else, that's a huge success for us because we're incredibly territorial. You'll almost never hear someone from the low country talking to someone in the upstate about anything beyond saying you're bougie. Beyond saying the only thing you have is good food, which, as a low country born and raised, I'd like to say that we have the best food, but that's neither here nor there. Tammy and Edie, I'd love to hear what, when you're kind of thinking about what people should know about our state or what they should hear about our state, what would you share?
I'll take that one first, Edie. You summed it up really well. South Carolina is, we are fiercely loyal to South Carolina. We think there's no state better, but internally we are very competitive with each other. The area where I live is the upstate. We're in, I'd call it like the valleys. We're like below the mountains. And traditionally people have always seen that part of the state as highly resourced. And the politics have played out in that way. When the power is in the middle or the lower part of the state, South Carolina can, I mean, not South Carolina, Spartanburg and Greenville can be ignored because of the amount of perceived wealth that's there, when actually the wealthiest part of the state is in the lower part of the state. But it's yeah, but it's the people here are really warm and caring. But you know, we're not any different from any other part of the nation, you know, where people feel really loyal to the place where they live, and really just kind of want the best for the communities that they live in. It's really, really a small state when you think about the sense of community. A lot of the people in the upstate know a lot of folks in the middle part of the state and the lower part of the state. They socialize with each other, but yeah, it's just an interesting it's an interesting place to live, and because of that, because people are so much in community with each other, sometimes we get a lot of good things done, and then other times we can't get anything done. So I'll just kind of stop there. Edie, you got anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I think that what I can add as a non-native, so I am originally from Buffalo, New York, and I am reminded all the time that I'm not really from South Carolina, even though I've been here more than 20 years. And for me, it is a very small state. It's a small community. It's a small town. But we also have a huge influx of Yankees and others, you know, moving to this part of the world. And there's definitely a tension and a push and pull between, you know, people who have been here and the people who are coming here.
Sure.
And there's sometimes some divide between that, you know, especially in the areas that have a large influx of, you know, folks from Ohio or wherever else they come from in the country. That's number one. Number two, I will say that the philanthropic community, so whether you're a community foundation or a private foundation or an individual donor, generally does things very quietly for the most part. And they don't like sharing and like people knowing their business sort of thing. And it's interesting, you know, coming from a different place that, you know, philanthropy and was much more celebrated and vocal and out front, but it is a very generous place, just not overtly so. It's almost like it's not in good taste to talk about it. Somebody will tell you, oh, bless your heart, which is not a positive thing.
Absolutely. I think that is what makes the Amplify strategy so special and unique for South Carolina. It is a strategy that focuses on having a robust paid ecosystem of organizers, which is almost unheard of across our state, where people are paid to do organizing work and can sustain themselves. It is a strategy that very clearly focuses on Black land ownership and Gullah and Native land ownership, and how do we preserve that work. Something that's honestly talking about being clear on what a greater public investment in communities of color could look like, or even thinking about how can we start to increase the amount of capital that communities of color have, recognizing that South Carolina is the private lending capital of the US, if not of the world, in that every other state around us has banned predatory lending. And we are the headquarters for all predatory lending. So whether it be from people who live in South Carolina or folks who live in the surrounding states, lots of people are traveling to our state because of this access to capital issue. So I'd love to hear from the two of y'all. How did it kind of feel for y'all to be engaged in the development of a public strategy that was as, you know, kind of hush hush and in your face as the one that we built together? And how did that kind of shape your engagement with Amplify?
So I'll jump in and I'll take this one. I loved it. It was refreshing in so many ways. It wasn't smarty pants philanthropy. That's what I call when a bunch of very smart people get in a room and decide how to, you know, do good things. it was just refreshing. And I will say, Shai, especially for you, you always asked, who should I be talking to? Who else is there? Who's not here? Who do you know, or who knows somebody else who knows somebody else who knows somebody else? And it's a very relational, I mean, I think you've talked about that before, way of doing the work, which is so important in such a small place as South Carolina, because we only know who we know. And so I might have been able to tell you a few other people to talk to, but then Tammy had more and Bernie had more and everybody else had more. And so that you were opening the circle rather than closing it and keeping it very tight was a breath of fresh air, really.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, it was interesting. Because I live you know, and I work in a community that's so red, the idea of bringing this type of daylighting this type of work. I'll be honest with you, I was a little, I wasn't hesitant. I was ready to dive into it, but I was very cautious in terms of thinking, okay, how do um, I relay this information back to my community? How do I take what I'm learning and how much this is you kind of broaden my thinking about how you get in community and in conversation with folks who are actually doing the work. Um, what does this look like when I'm having conversations with other colleagues and stakeholders in my community? And what's the proper context in which to relay this concept so that it doesn't get shut down right away? And Shai, you know, you and Edie both know, I mean, South Carolina is, well, you guys watched us with over the last month or so. And so you kind of get an idea of the challenges that we have. So it has been a breath of fresh air. I have very much appreciated this idea and this concept of us building together because you know, I'm a member of Edie and I both are members of the South Carolina Grantmakers Network. And we've had conversations at our meetings where there's been, you know, this kind of, why can't we get national funders to come in and invest in our community? And recently, one of the gentlemen who has since retired just said, well, you know, we're tired of them coming in here and telling us what to do. We don't like them coming in here and telling us what to do. They don't have any context for what's happening in our state. And they can be working in our community and no one's contacted us. And that's a real feeling and experience. And this, I think this was a great way to approach, you know, how do you build community? How do you work in South Carolina? How do you find out where work is happening or where work needs to happen? So I really appreciated this, the process that you used to kind of engage us, and it's been really a rewarding experience.
It has been such a joy to be in community with you all. And as I think about Get It Together, I think we've really gotten each other together. I can't tell you how many times I have just randomly popped up at the Coastal Carolina office and sat down and said, hey, can I just work here for a couple of hours, or have someone ask me a couple questions, or sit with Tammy and think through a strategy or a solution, or provide some support to Ariel, one of our other local strategy advisors, and really just being here to weave the gaps, to think through strategy together, to be able to really hold each other together. So a question that I have for y'all is, how have y'all felt supported through some of the more challenging work within y'all's foundations, or even within the larger, more conservative philanthropic space in South Carolina?
Yeah, I'll start there. We've so my organization's, I would say it's fairly new. We had our first hired philanthropic staff person full time. He was hired in 2013. I came aboard in 2015, and we're a small staff of now 4 people specifically dedicated to the philanthropic side of it. but our work was around economic mobility, right? We were trying to figure out, we've always been focused on systems and understanding that we couldn't really make any real change funding program after program after program, but that there needed to be some alignment and some connection. And there needed to be the breakdown of some policies and practices and, and changing resource flows and changing minds about how people think about things. And when we started that work, it was lonely. There weren't a whole lot of funders that were talking that way in our community. And, we worked really a lot with getting other folks involved in that conversation. But since doing this work with Amplify, it has amplified the conversations that we're having about, we can't continue to look at the grass tops and expect the change we want to see. We've got to start investing in the communities and the people who have been, working with very little to help build their capacity and build infrastructure for so those communities can be a part of this discussion we're having about what does economic mobility look like in our community, who's being left out, how do you include them. And so I would say that now I feel like there were a lot of times when you and I spoke, Shai, and you probably don't even know it, you would drop a nugget about the importance of of leaving the funder hat outside the door and really just allowing that person to kind of lead the conversation and taking that information and contextualizing it and recognizing that just because they don't speak our language, and when I say our language, you guys know our community, we've got jargons, and acronyms and all that stuff. But by listening to them, helping to craft their argument, if you will, to others, so that the others, feel like they have permission now, or they feel more comfortable with actually talking to people who don't look like them. So I think that's where I'll leave it. I can go a whole lot more, but Edie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think I agree totally. And I think the 2 points that I want to raise is one, I was constantly reminded that this is a practice, and Shai's nuggets or whatever, but I would get impatient with something, or I would, see something yet again that would be, but really that this is a practice, and you keep on doing and doing and practicing, and you get better each time. And it's really helped open up personally in this field, but then also for the foundation to take that sort of mantra, because we want change. We want to see something good come out of. We want to engage community. We want to lift up community wisdom and honor it, and because there's so much there. But it's not a magic wand, and at least I don't have it. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that, for every idea or something that I would run across, I'd be like, hey, what do you think of this idea? Or is this crazy? Or, oh, hey, would you serve on a grants committee for us? Or, hey, we're thinking about doing this, but how can we really lean in? And all those, oh, hey moments, either texting or calling or whatever, have just been so incredibly important. It gives us, a sounding board, and, y'all are really good about saying if something is really kind of not fully fleshed out in nice terms, or if like there's something really there. You've been really good about pushing and galvanizing and amplifying, and I've just appreciated feeling like I'm part of a community, like I'm part of, this isn't a, hey, you've done something for a little while and see you later. I feel like after Amplify is, the sunset is around, like I'll still talk to you guys. I'll still be able to say, hey, Melody, what do you think about ABC, or, whatever. So I've really appreciated that in particular.
Tammy, were you going to add something
No,
in there?
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You know, for the benefit of everybody else, our organization's going through what we call an organizational refresh because our board members hate the idea of strategic planning. And a lot of that is now we're in the strategic strategy piece of it. You know, where what are we going to be doing? What's the work look like on the on the ground? And I'm looking forward to pinging you and Melody and about, you know, when we talk about eliminating or cultural barriers and building capacity, that's not something that we're experts in. We've not done that work. Admittedly, we've been guilty of kind of the sitting on in the white ivory tower. And you know, in some instances, you know, we've tried to, yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. But, you know, we recognize that that's not our expertise. That's not something we do very well. And so, you know, I've already kind of thrown you guys' name out there as part of our our strategy team and helping us think about how we implement that. So, and that is a benefit from, you know, this process that, you know, I'm walking away with. So I really appreciate that.
It has been so much of a pleasure and a joy to get to sit in on y'all's grant making committees or help kind of push board members to be a little bit more liberal or to make statements about supporting the movement for Black lives, or even thinking about what it looks like to fund folks who previously just don't have the right language, just don't have the right words, just don't have the right things in order to be able to get grants. And I think is my last question for us that I would love for y'all to reflect on is where's the joy? Our work is so filled with joy. Our time together has more laughter and biscuits and jam and pictures of cats and dogs and of our children and of TikTok videos that we love than probably any other work I've ever done. And then what advice would you give to other people doing donor organizing in a conservative state? So I would just say, if I had to give any advice, I would say to take it slow. We have been building this relationship now for over a year together. And we are now at a point where our donor organizing, I think, feels really natural, and it feels like just being in deeper community with each other. And my joy is getting to spend more and more time with y'all, both in our work that directly impacts our communities, but also in just how I get to be a part of y'all's daily lives and get Christmas cards and birthday hellos and just little texts and emails of encouragement. So I will pass it on over. Where is the joy in your work, and what advice would you give someone else trying to do this work?
So the joy is that I have been able, this has been a space and an opportunity to share honestly without retribution or judgment. It has been such an uplifting, positive experience because, you know, everything we do isn't great and perfect. In fact, we make lots of mistakes and we stumble. And so the joy for me is that I can authentically be who I am. I can bring something forward and y'all just don't laugh at me or, you know, go, oh, you know, that Coastal Community Foundation is never going to make it. That's my joy. My advice is that this is not a destination. Equity work and power building, you don't arrive. And so it doesn't matter where you are, like how liberal your foundation is or how conservative or in between, there is always some step you can take, and you just keep on taking them. So kind of a spin on go slow.
Yeah, that's good, Edie. My joy, it is, you know, my joy is that I feel like I'm able to not just show up, but lead more authentically within my organization. I'd struggled a little bit with trying to figure out how to balance that argument of supporting grassroots and being able to make that connection for my board members and as a Black woman. kind of feeling, especially growing up in this area, and some of the things that you do here, and the noise that we hear about, why is it Black Lives Matter, or why isn't it blue? Well, this has made me it's made me unapologetic, this experience about it, because what I got to be a witness to, especially with the work down in the Charleston area, it made me more conscious of the absence of that in the upstate and the need for it, and my role as an advocate in the seat that I'm in, to start lifting up, if you want, before you can, don't, let's not blame people for poverty. And that's not the solution. Let's talk about these systems that have created this, and let's talk about communities where people have had um, some agency, they've had resources, they've had infrastructure, and they've made change, and their communities look different. And so the joy has been in just showing up and thinking about my work differently, and then knowing that I've got some folks that I can kind of turn back. 80 and I will have different conversations now. We've always talked to each other when we see each other, but they're different conversations. There will be different conversations about this work, and the celebrations, and also the failures, and what did we learn from those. And that's what I'd say the joy is for me. It's in feeling unapologetic now about giving voice to people who need it, about setting the stage for them and letting them take over the microphone. And I'd say, I don't know that I differ very much from, the lesson or the advice. I think the advice is to recognize that, South Carolina is different. We were the first state to succeed from the nation. That's not an accident. And that attitude has not left us. We had the gentleman who's still in Congress, God help us, who said to, President Barack Obama, "You lie." He's from South Carolina. So it takes, but on the other side of that is relationships matter. And when you get in relationship with people here, they have more, especially when you can find the things that you share in common, then there is progress that can be made. It may not, and to be patient with that progress, and to recognize that what happens in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and North Carolina is not going to be the same as the progress that might be made in South Carolina, but there is progress to be made. And I'd also say, it's kind of funny when Melody said earlier in her comments about the states that they were working in, she said, and South Carolina. And I thought, yeah, and South Carolina. Yeah. Because we get, I think we get ignored a lot. And because we've been ignored by the nation, national funders, and the great work that's being done around us, because we've been ignored, we have a lot more building to do, a lot more capacity building and infrastructure to build. So yeah, be patient, but be dedicated. Don't come in and think it's gosh, I can't believe that just floated through my mind, but because it did, I'm going to share it with you. It's not a hit it and quit it state. I'm done.
I love that so much. We are not a hit it and quit it state. Before we kind of pass it over to some questions and answers, I just want to say thank y'all so much for coming and listening to us talk about a place that we love so much, and that we keep coming back to, and we keep fighting for. And I think if you hear nothing else from our work, it is that we are committed to seeing our beloved home become a space that is comfortable for all of us to come home. And we are not hit it or quit it kind of people. We are here to stay, and here to do this organizing. And I'm gonna pass it over to Rini.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Shai, Edie, and Tammy, for sharing your honesty, your joy, your stories, and helping us bring it all to life. I know in the Q&A, you're going to even bring in more joy, more honesty, more depth of what is happening in South Carolina, and really the durable relationships you've all created through sort of working with Amplify, and how that's even going beyond that. And I'll be moderating and working on the Q&A with you all. But before we dive into all of that, we want to let everyone have a little bit of a bio and dance break for one song, just 3 minutes. So everyone will be back in 3 minutes. And also during that time, please put in the chat any questions you have for our fantastic panelists. We'll also bring back Melody. So Melody will be joining the conversation. So we're going to take a very quick 3-minute dance break. But please be back and bring all your questions for a really exciting 30-minute conversation with our panelists, and we could even get into more deeper and juicier conversations. All right. So please drop questions in the chat. We're all checking it out, and we have this fantastic panel with us. And so for the next 30 minutes, we're really going to dig into these questions and really bring to light the work that's happening in South Carolina in particular. I was going to actually ask, Melody, you had a great question. Did you want to kick that off? And then I have another question. I have several questions on board after that.
Sure, happy to. So my question was really for y'all, Tammy and Edie and Shai as well, would love your thoughts on what it would take to build an aligned kind of funder strategy in South Carolina to support more progressive organizing and Black-led work, and how any additional ideas about how Amplify and/or NFG could be of support in that.
That's a really good question. So what I'll say is there are a group of funders in the state who are thinking more about how to work together to build power in the state, in communities of color and in underrepresented communities. I think that the way to have that more aligned is, as much as, you might hear some funders complain about national funders coming in, there's still a certain luster, if you will, or a certain level of importance or that comes when you have a national funder come into the state and say, we want to invest in South Carolina, and the intent is to build community with the funders and building community, right? And so that's kind of the best way to do it, to find the multipliers within that community, who, if we know in the upstate, if in Greenville in particular, if Hollingsworth raises their hand to say we're going to do X, or we want to see what's going on, then a lot of other funders are going to either come aboard or they're going to watch and wait to see what we tell them. And I'd say it's the same thing with the Coastal Community Foundation. I think it's the same with Central Carolina's foundation with Joanne in Columbia. And so it's a matter of, and some others, but in building community with whoever the multipliers are, and helping and having a conversation about, this is for you guys, this is what our work is, this is what we would like to do. Talk to us a little bit about, do you see a need for this in your state? Hopefully they would say yes. And how can we bring our resources? How can we combine our resources, not just financial, but our intellectual capital as well, along with our reputational capital, to bring how can we bring this to bear on this issue? I think that's probably the best way to do it. because again, it's recognizing that there is some value to what exists, but it's leveraging what you who are outside of the state is leveraging your resources, all of your philanthropic capital, if you will, along with ours in the state, to then create just exactly what Amplify did, create a strategy to then go out and execute. That's kind of my thinking about that.
Yeah, I agree. I do think the other thing is about having an open invitation and a regular invitation. So I can think back to South Carolina grant makers, for example, that we've been talking about for years and years and years. You know, maybe we should fund stuff together, maybe we should do something together, and it took probably like 10 years. And we actually did collectively fund work around the census, which was, you know, I mean, I can't remember how many of the foundations, you know, community and private foundations came together and, you know, kicked into the kitty. And that was like monumental. You know, and I think we need to build on that. So, you know, you're having the funder community, you know, having opportunities. I mean, I know we're not in person anymore, but even the convening we had in Charleston not too long ago, there were other funders who were invited who came, but some of them who didn't come for whatever reason, but were interested and curious, you know. So I think that if we can continue to build on that, and then we all talk more regularly, you know, it's not that we all have to say we're going to fund only this one thing together, but if we recognize the importance of this one thing and sort of what happens around it, that way we can still fund and plug in and come closer together. It's not necessarily agreement on one exact specific thing. And I see movement. I mean, you know, even for, you know, again, for the grant makers, I mean, we had ABFI come and do one of our sessions where Edward talked all about the imperatives, what it meant, what it looked like, really challenged, you know, and it was really very well attended. Wasn't one of those sessions where only the more progressive folks showed up or only the program people, which, you know, so I think it's a continuation of sort of the things that the seeds that have been planted, and the continued invitation in this virtual world that we're in at the moment.
Great, thank you, Edie. I don't know, Shai, do you want to chime in on the question, Melody's question?
I think the only thing I would say is encouraging folks to have funder events in South Carolina. So what might it look like for ABFI to happen somewhere in South Carolina? That's like maybe Columbia, or having those types of like philanthropic learning events within the state. Because I think it would encourage more folks to engage or to come, or who are curious to learn, and would also show a willingness to be with us where we're at, in our state, like in our communities, and kind of hearing us out.
Thank you.
It's a really great point, especially since we do things at conferences, you know, but to actually invite people home here and to learn and to grow, that's a totally different thing. That's a great idea.
Great, thank you. We have a great question from Amy Kenyon, who's one who just spoke earlier, and she says, as an Amplify funder, we're on our own journey of centering racial justice and Black leadership in our grant making and steering committee culture. She would love to hear more about both of your foundations' evolution towards centering racial equity, and how the relationship with Amplify and NFG supports you in that. Who would like to take that, Edie or Tammy?
Well, Edie, you
jump
can
in.
take it first.
Yeah. So our journey was really rooted in the massacre at Mother Emanuel. And it was something that was indisputable, that you couldn't ignore it. You couldn't not pay attention. Of course, we didn't know necessarily what to do or how to do it. And we tried a whole bunch of things. One of my epic failures of all time in my career happened at that time. But there were also some really important things. And so it was a lot of small things. You know, we have a neighborhood funding program that does, you know, small funding to grassroots leaders, and we were able to attract more money to do the leadership development piece of it. We were, you know, and that was like little bits of money, $15,000 here, $5,000 there. We actually have a full equity, diversity, and inclusion policy statement. It has threads on every department, not only how we do our grant making, but how we do HR and how we do development, you know, who we hire, what our vendors are. And I'm glad to share it. We're always glad to share it, but it has a lot of work to do. So we've been on the journey for a long time, building and building and building. But your question about funding Black-led social change, essentially funding Black and Brown-led organizations. We are just now coming around the bend on that. So, you know, we did look at some of our data early on about what we funded and who we funded. And, you know, it's not a huge snapshot, but it was of our competitive funding. And it showed that we, you know, generally funded organizations run by white people versus others. We gave more restrictions for organizations that were Black and Brown led. We gave lesser amounts. I mean, and, you know, add on the rural aspect of it. And, you know, it didn't really tell a good story. And so we made incremental progress. We borrowed an equity toolkit from the California Endowment and applied it on our competitive grant making. We started having different conversations, even with our donor advisors who were open and willing around, you know, Tammy mentioned the forms of philanthropic capital, you know, the SMRF, which opened up a whole nother conversation with donors about equity and what that looked like. And so we are now finally, and I will say, I do think participating in Amplify and doing this work and having, you know, all y'all come to Charleston was a really big cachet moment. Like, oh my gosh, the Ford Foundation is looking at that. You know, I mean, it's like, holy cow. But it has allowed us to really push forward on that. So we are now talking about what the strategy looks like, how to be bold and unapologetic and explain why and lead with our values. You know, it looks different in our footprint because you go to Myrtle Beach, it's much different than Charleston, much different than, you know, Jasper County. But we've been able to build all these runways, like these on-ramps to different things that I'm really excited what's coming, that I think that we will set goals around what it looks like and what it should look like and how it should represent the communities that we serve. But it has been a 6-year plus in the making, which goes back to my point earlier about it's not a destination. Like there's not, and this can't be just, you know, we're capitalizing on a moment, like it's the talk about this, it has to be part of the way you do your work and how you move and how you engage and who you listen to and who you talk to. So there's a lot I could share, but persistence, tenacity, and celebrating even the tiny small wins are so important.
Thank you. That's really, really poignant and honest, that it does take time, and it really does, but you have to start and you have to move along the journey. So that's really helpful to hear. Tammy, is there anything you want to add or Shai to that?
Yeah, you know, so here's the contrast to the great work that Edie and the Coastal Community Foundation has been doing. We in our region, the upstate, I think, and I'll just speak specifically to Greenville County. I'll speak specifically to my organization. We just started, really. As staff, we've been having these conversations around racial equity, and our data points just lifted up I mean, when you look at who's not graduating from high school, who doesn't have post-secondary attainment, who are not homeowners, who the poverty level, children in poverty, it's all really Black people, um, people of color and Hispanics. And so, you know, we had we were having a difficult time as staff because we were talking and doing differently than what our webpage said about what our work. And because we shifted to really wanting to be more systems focused and less programmatic, we recognized that we had to bring our board along because we were getting frustrated. We knew we wanted to be more explicit about our work, so we could stop getting the calls from Defenders for Dogs. They do great work, but that's not what we're trying to fund right now. And so we took an inventory of everything that has influenced our thinking over the last few years. And it starts with, I won't say it starts, but Raj Chetty's work around economic mobility in the United States. That's a foundational document for us. The Water of Systems Change by FSG. And then several other organizations, Billion Dollar Bets by Bridge. I think it's, I can't remember who that is right now. And then also the work that exists around racial equity and equity in our work. And we made a catalog of all those documents. And we also engaged a woman of color to lead our organizational refresh work, because we recognize that our vision needed to be more explicit, and our mission needed to be more explicit. And whenever we'd done any type of work like that, it was always you're also ran usually a white male, sometimes a white female, but we wanted somebody who had a lens specifically around social justice and racial equity, and work from a foundation point of view, right? And so we found, it was someone that I knew, and I bumped into her at the Grantmakers for Southern Progress conference last year, I believe. Her name is Tracy Green Washington. And so Tracy has helped us to organize our work so that we had an educational piece to every meeting we have. And we organized it around systems change, around economic mobility, and more importantly, around equity, racial equity. And just started having these meaty conversations about each one of the readings that we had and how that connects to our community. So if we're talking about racial equity, why are we talking about racial equity? Well, we're talking about it because we've got some clear issues in our community, some underlying issues that, not just as a nation, but as a community, we need to grapple with so that we can help, eliminate some of these barriers and create pathways for people to be successful. And so that's led us to, the board embracing, a different set of values where equity is clearly one of them. It's changed. We have a theory of change. We haven't released any of this yet, but we introduced them to a theory of change where we say, systems change plus an equity lens, plus our SMRF will lead to increased economic mobility. And honestly, a lot of the thinking, because that came to me, I'm the one who introduced Tracy to the organization. And I was pushing that we had to have somebody with that lens to help us do that work. And it's interesting because I will say this, I became more conscious of that need for that through this work with Amplify. I don't know that I would have gotten here this quickly had I not been a part of this process. And we've had some, because we've got the gamut on our board. We've got some very conservative, some some very conservative people on our board. We've got some who are right in the middle, and then others who are a little bit more liberal. And we've been able to have some meaningful conversations about the condition of our community, so much so that there's been this knitting of opposite sides of, dare I say the aisle, I hate to say that, but opposite sides of this coin, where people recognize that, yeah, we've got some issues around racial equity, but what is the other folks would say, but what is the economic argument for that? Right. And so keeping us honest, not honest, but keeping us focused on, you've got to think about the context of the community that you're in, and then take this information so that it speaks to, you know, this audience needs to hear this more, this audience needs to hear that more, but you can combine that so that it's a comprehensive story around this work. So that, you know, that's kind of the way we have started centering racial equity. I don't know that you, just because of where we are, you know, because one of our board members was like, I don't know if we can say racial equity, but we can say equity. You know, and if you say equity, when you get to equity, it's obviously going to be about race. So that's just our journey. That's been our journey. We have a long way to go, but our board has, you know, it's I've been there for 5 years now, and we started having this conversation at the beginning of the year. And so, you know, I see that as a big win for us to even get them to the point where we, you know, have a theory of change that actually says systems and equity. That's a big win for me. I celebrate that.
That's great. You have to celebrate the wins. I think Shai, or I think all of you said that in the earlier panel, you got to celebrate the wins. Are so important, especially in this day and age. And as you said earlier too, just about South Carolina, and kind of everyone is quite, you know, fiercely loyal, but also a little territorial. So it's just like building those bridges. They're in so many multiple levels. They're from the ground and from even the philanthropic space too. So we have a whole bunch of questions coming up to you, but and everything from, and I'm going to give you a couple. So one is this, like Seema from House US asked, what are some of the issue priorities going, like in 2021, from your perspective, from your grantees' perspective, what are some of the issue priorities for Black-led organizing? To actually, how do you go from issue-based work to supporting multi-issue, intersectional Black-led power building work? Just like sort of, if anyone could tackle that, sort of like, what are the 2021 issues? Where do you see the multi-issue intersectional work? And then I'll add a third question into that has also been asked. Maybe you want to lift up a grantee, like what one of your grantee partners that excites you, that you feel like are really centering the work around Black-led organizing. If you want to lift that up and sort of talk to us about specifically how they're building power, particularly whether it's an issue or in a multi-intersectional approach. You could sort of look at it through that lens too. I think it'd be great to hear from for the audience too, just like how does power building look like in South Carolina on the ground, whether it's through issue specific or really multi-issue intersectional approach. Where do you see the kind of identifying factors, the durableness of organizing? How would you what excites you about some of the work that you're doing on the ground, and where do you see the, sort of the issues or the priorities in 2021? Who wants to take them? That's a lot, but I wanted to throw that out. I think we have like 10 minutes left. So I wanted to sort of get all those questions, and if you want to think about it a little bit, but just really what excites you, what kind of issues, what's multi-issue, intersectional work look like, particularly Black-led organizing? What does that look like on the ground? Who wants to take that?
Oh gosh, I will try.
Oh, all right, Edie. Yeah.
And I'll try to
go for it.
So I will say that our topical areas, access, education, and affordability came from the community conversations we had a couple years ago. So we interviewed a whole bunch of people, talked to them. Most of them didn't even know who the heck we were. We were invited into communities, and they talked about a lot of things, but those were the 3 topical areas that were prioritized by our board. And those are all, nothing is an easy in a nice little box. They're intersectional. And for us, there have been a couple strategies, but two I'll talk about is one is our impact investing fund, which we launched last year, and we're doing equity loan and loan guarantees for nonprofits or for-profits. And it had to be around one of those topical areas. And it was the first time for us doing that, for us launching it, but it was really to try to support the community, nonprofit or for-profit, in a different way around social impact and how to measure it and what it looked like. And I can talk about a little bit more if anybody has questions about that afterwards. But that was a really important strategy for us to get at some of the issues in a meaty way, and then also to attract co-investing, whether that meant from grants or from other local angel investing in our area. So that's one. The second one is I'll lift up, we work in a lot of areas, but one of the neighborhoods we work in it's a historic neighborhood called Liberty Hill, which is in North Charleston. And it's a partnership between us, Boeing, Reverend Rivers Church, whose name escapes me at the moment, a local nonprofit, and it's around STEM education, but also supports for parents who are underemployed. It's also about housing. So it has a couple different dimensions, and really trying to help build capacity and support and come alongside a community in developing what those plans and strategies. We're actually in our 4th year, I think, with that. And that has been really started out very small, but the intent was always to grow it to something much more meaningful and much more significant that would have long-term impacts in a neighborhood that is often overlooked and underinvested in. So that was hopefully brief enough, but enough information to get at that. And what am I excited about? I'm sorry. I'm excited that we might, I'm excited that Charity Baptist, thank you, Shai. I'm excited that the work we're doing next year is going to be deeper and more forward-leaning than it has been this year. And I'm excited that we have our board members regularly talking about understanding the landscape of Black-led organizations within our footprint. Like, we don't know who we don't know. And we kind of need to know the landscape to really do something in a meaningful way. And that multiple board members are talking about it and advocating that we actually have money to invest in it. And so that is the happy dance moments for me. So
I think if I can, I was gonna hop in here real quick, Tammy. I think something that feels really important to me to lift up, right, is that the Carolinas are overrepresented in Equity Lab's recent list of the highest amount of evictions in the country, with 3 South Carolina cities ending up in the top 30 and North Charleston being the number 1. So when I think about what Black organizers are organizing around, it's actually civic engagement, right? Like, people are now starting to say, like, civic engagement and this type of organizing is something that helps us deal with issues like housing, and then also like land loss. And what does it look like to deal with the fact that people are getting pushed out more and more, not just from cities, but now even rural communities that, haven't been touched. We're talking about spaces 45 minutes outside of Charleston, starting to experience gentrification in a way that they never have before. And I think the growing housing crisis within the state is something that is pushing folks to do a different level of organizing because they have to. And if I had to shout out some folks that I'm excited about, I'd say KJM, who I think is always doing amazing work, organizing police audits and teaching folks how to organize, and really raveling up both the religious community as well as just everyday folks, and then Step by Step, who is really working at the intersections of the criminal justice system in reentry and doing a lot of that advocacy and policy work, and really thinking about how do you pair that with economic development and housing, and also just healing and joy-centered work. So two of my, and no one has favorites, but if I had to say like two folks I'm excited about hearing how they grow over the next year, I think those would be my two. And the housing issue, I think, is the one that feels like it's the most poignant right now as our eviction crisis is continuing to grow.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd add anything different. Partially because, I think we're in baby steps in this work, really. And I will say step by step came to mind when you mentioned that, a group that I'm excited about, because we have been supportive of some efforts in our community to bring about God, where's the word? Expungement legislation. And so the emergence of step by step, and when I say emergence, they were always there. I just had not engaged them, and I just happened to be contacted by someone else about them, and of course introduced them to Shy. And I think that work is probably what I'm most excited about. But we've got I think what I'm getting really excited about is just the opportunity to take a minute to do the landscape. Who's doing the work? We have no clue. I mean, we got the also, you have your also communities, right? Your organizations, you've got your urban leagues and, some of the local other organizations in our community, but there are others who are doing this work, who are making a lot of impact. But, and I'm curious to see what would it look like if the flow of resources changes to be more supportive of them versus these organizations that have been I call it kingdom building. They've started with one mission, and rather than partner with someone else who's doing some work, they decided to bring it in house. And so, yeah, and we've been guilty of we've created that Frankenstein monster. But what is it going to look like if we, when we start sending those resources to organizations that are really in community? So that's what I'm excited about.
Great. Thank you so much, Shy, Tammy, Melody. I don't know if you have any other quick comments or what you're excited about. Anything you want to chime in for a minute?
I will just say that I'm excited about. We now have, I think, 8 grantees in South Carolina across the state, both in the Low Country and up by Tammy, upstate, and we are just super, and half of those groups we just started funding over the summer. And so we're really excited to be working with, a wide range of organizations that work on issues from like heirs property to economic justice issues to like divesting from policing in schools to then invest in funds in community. And we are very much looking forward to doing that in partnership with Tammy and Edie and other funders locally. And, speaking of folks who participated in our February 4th pre-COVID, Charleston visit that we did in person before, everything went crazy this year. There are a number of funders in South Carolina that we hope to continue to build relationships with, especially now that we have like a core base of grantee partners to really, be of service and be of support as the Amplify Fund and NFG in this work. And really, as you said, Edie, think about the practice of this work. What does it actually mean to like change internal foundation policies to like upend the status quo of the way we've been working and doing this whole time? It looks like, changing our reporting, our like crazy reporting requirements, and it looks like making the application process have less barriers, and it looks like the really kind of functional operational pieces of this, I think, are the practice of the work as well. And so just thinking collectively about and trying out new and different ways of doing that together, I think is what I'm excited about, and seeing what that then results in the support of powerful work in the state and in the region. So very excited about that, and just excited to be in person again someday soon with y'all in South Carolina.
Well, I'm looking at the time and we have unfortunately a minute left. So I wanted to first thank Shai, Tammy, and Edie, and Melody for this fantastic panel. It's really just, we could go on and on and on. I was in South Carolina in February, my last work travel. I have many memories and lots of stories and just incredible learning. Noise has really actually benefited from that visit alone and among others. If you want to learn more about Amplify, please reach out to Amy Morris at amy@nfg.org. I'm sure everyone knows how to get in touch with Amy. But thank you so much for all the attention and the focus. And really, I really want to thank, again, Shai, Tammy, and Edie, just about the honesty, the joy, the breaking of biscuits, and all of it. So thank you again. And I think we're at close now at 5 o'clock. So thank you very much.